It's fine, she says as it's not fine. Hello friends, my name is Aaliyah, and today I'm going to go over all of the books that I read in the month of March. You may or may not know, but for the month of March, I participated in the Tis the Damn Readathon, which is a Taylor Swift themed readathon hosted by Drinking by My Shelf and a bunch of other content creators. I will have the original announcement video down in the description, but yeah, it was a really fun Taylor Swift themed readathon where the challenges were based on all the different albums, and it was just a whole lot of fun and a really great time. A great way to structure my reading for the month, and I ended up reading a whole lot. Definitely my best reading month of the year, hands down, and probably just my best reading month in a while. So I'm very happy with how it all turned out. I ended up reading 5 books for the readathon and then a couple other ones. And yeah, I just had a really good time this month. So anyway, let's just get into all of the books because I'm really excited to tell you all my thoughts. The first book I read in March was Here the Whole Time by Vitor Martins. This is a book in translation from Brazil, so it was originally in Brazilian Portuguese. And this is also the book I chose for my buzzword reading challenge. The buzzword for March was time, so this all checked out. But this is a young adult male-male romance following Felipe and Caio. Felipe is our main character, and he is getting ready to go on break. It is his school's winter break, and he's really looking forward to having 2 to 3 weeks of just being outside of school, not having to deal with all those people, and doing whatever he wants. This is kind of thrown out the window when his neighbor Caio ends up having to stay with him over the break. And that wouldn't really be much of an issue if it weren't for the fact that Felipe has had a huge crush on Caio for forever. So it's a little difficult to keep those feelings in check. But this was really sweet. This was just, it was a very like heartwarming book. It does take place over the course of 15 days, but I do really like the development we get for Felipe. A central part of this book is Felipe's body image issues. He is fat, and it's something that he deals with a lot. He faces a lot of bullying, and he goes to therapy for it. There's actually a really great portrayal of therapy in here that I really appreciated, and I really liked how that was dealt with in here as just, you know, a way that he's been able to, I guess, move through his issues. And so I really liked that aspect in here. But other than that, like just seeing his relationship with Caio, it was so sweet and awkward. And I really loved just watching them warm up to each other and slowly figure out how to get to know each other. And yeah, it was just a whole lot of fun. I really also just liked the fact that this is very much about how someone can get really involved in their own issues and forget that other people have issues too. And that we're all kind of here on this planet to take care of each other for our respective issues and things we have to deal with. And that none of us is ever alone in those things. It was just a really lovely read. I really enjoyed my time reading this. I guess I would just wish it would be a little longer because it's a bit of a shorter novel, but that's just because I wanted to see more of Caio and Felipe. So yeah, anyway, I enjoyed myself thoroughly with this and I gave it 4 stars. The second book I read in March was Murder of Crows by Anne Bishop. This is the second book in the Others series, which is an urban paranormal fantasy, and this was a whole lot of fun. I read this for the red prompt, which was to read a book with red on the cover. And yeah, I enjoyed myself thoroughly reading this. I can't give a full synopsis because sequel spoilers, but just to give an overview, we have our main character, Meg. She is a blood prophet, so whenever she bleeds, she can see visions. And up until recently, up until the events of the first book, or I guess the beginning of the first book, she has lived in captivity her whole life. And so the first book follows her after escaping captivity and finding herself in a community of the Others. The Others kind of encapsulate all paranormal creatures you could possibly think of. We have werewolves, vampires, other kinds of shapeshifters. It runs the gamut. There's a whole lot of them. But anyway, so she finds herself in this courtyard, this community of the others. And the first book is for her, following her learning how to be a free person, and kind of finding her place among the others and kind of finding a bit of a found family there. So yes, the second book obviously follows the events of the first book, and it was so much fun. Something about these books is just, they're just compulsively readable. I just can't stop reading them, even though the plot is still very slow going. Like, it is a slow paced series, but I don't hate it. It's a lot of fun. It's definitely more focused on the characters and their interactions with each other, which is just my kind of book, honestly. I really liked the second book because we see a little bit more of the world. The world expands a little bit more, and we kind of get glimpses of what the overall plot of the whole series is going to be. And I really like the way it's going. We're getting a little bit of intrigue. We're getting a little bit of a whole lot of stuff going on, and I enjoyed it a whole lot. Also seeing Meg develop even more as a person, and Simon, who is our main werewolf man, be absolutely stupid. I say in a fond way. I can't say the word fun over and over again, but that's how it felt. So anyway, I enjoyed myself so much reading this, and I can't wait to read the third book. I gave us 4 stars, and hopefully I will get to Vision in Silver very soon. The next book I read was Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. This is a memoir, so I read it for the Taylor Swift prompt, which was to read a memoir. And so this is a memoir by Caitlin Doughty, who is pretty well known for her YouTube channel, Ask a Mortician. On her YouTube channel, it's really all about explaining weird deaths and details of the death industry, that kind of stuff. It's very fascinating, and I've been watching her videos for a while now. So I was really interested to see how I would feel about her memoir, because as I've mentioned several times on this channel, I'm not a memoir person at all. I usually feel kind of so-so about them, and I find them kind of boring. That was not the case here. I loved this. I was not expecting to love this. I maybe was kind of expecting to love this, but like, this is unlike any other memoir I've ever read. And I think the reason why I liked this so much is it felt like such a learning experience. So the way this memoir kind of covers her first 6, I think, years in the death industry, of like when she started out at a crematory and then worked her way through getting experienced and deciding to go to mortuary school. And so like, yeah, it's just her beginnings in her chosen career. And the thing is, it's not just about her. And I think this is why I liked it so much, is she mixes in her anecdotes of like what she did with the history of the death industry, and also just explaining how things work. This is how a cremation machine works, and this is the science behind certain things. Also, this is the history of why this and this happens and what this all means. And I think I loved that. I mean, I love that so much, because it felt like I was learning along with her as she was going through her years of gaining her experience. I just think that the balance of anecdote with history, with science, with just more like, maybe not instruction, but just information, it was a perfect balance of stuff. And I really loved the way that she did it. I think the pacing was excellent. And it made it so much more fun to read, because it didn't feel like a slog, and it was very, like, you weren't just reading the same kind of thing the whole time. Is it weird to call it a dynamic book? It felt like a dynamic book. Like, you weren't just sitting in the same kind of writing the entire time. Anyway, I clearly loved it a lot, and I would highly recommend the audiobook for this. Caitlin Doughty narrates it herself, and she just has a way of speaking. I mean, her voice is very fun and playful, but also at the same time, like, she can just be very matter of fact, but then also very respectful. Like, she definitely has a reverence for her job that comes through both in the writing and in the way that she narrates it, that I think also just gives a little bit more to the reading experience, because you know that she believes in everything that she says and she cares a lot about it. And so I can't recommend this enough. I loved it. I never thought I would give a memoir 5 stars, but here we are. So just read it. Read it. Do it. The next book I read is a bit of a departure from death memoirs, but it was Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the 3rd book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. The first one being Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Then we have Take a Hint, Dani Brown. They're both wonderful. I loved them. I read them last year and I loved them. Anyway, so this is the 3rd book. I had very high hopes for this, and yet they were still exceeded somehow. I loved this. So we're following Eve Brown. She's the youngest of the 3 sisters, and she's kind of never really figured out what she wants to do with her life. She is very talented, very creative. She has lots of different skills, and she just has never really stuck with one thing for very long. Pretty much as soon as there's even a suggestion of potential failure, she runs for the hills. So it means that she just, hasn't stuck with anything for very long. She's not super fussed about it, but her parents are, and so they decide to cut her off until she can keep a job for a year. Eve is not particularly thrilled about this, and she ends up, by some weird circumstances, crashing an interview for a chef position at a B&B. She just wanted to find a job as soon as possible, and that's where she ended up. And that is where she meets Jacob. Jacob is the owner of the B&B, and he is kind of desperate for a chef, but he knows almost immediately that his personality is going to grate with Eve's so hard. And yet, because of circumstances, she ends up with this job as a chef at a B&B, and there's some clashing, but it is so much fun. So this is like a hate to love romance, and I loved this. This was so fun and so sweet. Like, I felt like I was in a cottage in the English countryside. But so like it takes place in a small town, and I really love just like that whole vibe of the thing. But really, like with all of these books, it's the characters that really make this shine. Jacob is just such a fun and interesting character to follow because he can be very rigid. He can be very just a little, not entitled, but you know, he has ways of doing things and they are the right way to do things, and there's no other way, which is definitely not how free-thinking Eve works. And so the way that they bounce off of each other is very fun. Also, Jacob is autistic, and that is something that comes out right off the bat, and that's just something he's very open about and he doesn't really see as this big deal. There is some, how would you call it? People being really nasty about his autism to him in this book, so I guess be aware of that if you're sensitive to that. But I think it was done, like, that was handled very well. And just the whole conversation around his autism is handled very well. Again, it's like a non-thing. It's just another piece of him and not something to be considered with extra sensitivity or anything like that, right? So I really loved that. And again, seeing him work off of Eve, and once they figure out how to work together, they work together beautifully. Like, this is definitely an opposites attract situation, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun, and also Eve's development over the course of this book was lovely. She just has such a crippling fear of failure, and this book is really helping her work through that and learning how to put herself in difficult positions in order to thrive. And I could go on and on. I loved this. I loved this so much. I cannot hype this enough. Also, fair warning, it is steamy. This is an adult romance, so be aware of that if you're sensitive to that too. But anyway, I loved this. Cannot recommend this enough. 5 stars, obviously. The next book I read was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I read this for the 1989 prompt to read a book with a number in the title. This is a young adult fantasy taking place in the Grisha universe. So Shadow and Bone being the first book. I haven't read that series, but I think you can get along fine reading Six of Crows without reading the Grishaverse at all, because I'm not particularly interested in the Grisha trilogy. Anyway, so this is a fantasy series. We have... how to start this? We have our one of our main characters is Kaz Brecker, and he is kind of a crime boss in this city of Ketterdam. Just like he has definitely got his hands in the underbelly of the city. And he is hired to perform this heist, this impossible heist. And so this book, just in a very basic sense, is about him putting together this ragtag team of characters with varying skills and such to pull off this heist. It's a fantasy, so there's magic and there's things going on. So that is basically what this is about. This is a booktube, book community, book world darling. This is something that has been recommended ad nauseum since it came out. And I am, as always, behind the trend, and I am only getting to it now. And because it's so hyped, you know, sometimes when something is so hyped, you always think it's not really going to be as great as you think it's going to be. So I was kind of hesitant moving into this because I know a lot of like popular things, especially young adult fantasy, I don't necessarily agree with. But I loved it. I love this so much. Okay, so I had a feeling I was going to love this pretty early on. And I think the reason for that is the way it is written, but the way that it's written in terms of its characters, because the shining jewel of this book is the characters. I haven't been so invested in an ensemble cast like this probably since I read The Raven Boys. The Raven Cycle is one of my favorite series and I loved it. And so like this is like, now this new ensemble cast has also grabbed my heart with a vice grip. Anyway, so all the characters are incredible. They are all incredibly flawed people. And I think that this book doesn't shy away from that. They can be very brutal, and yet there's something about the way that this is written that makes you so invested in them as characters and learning about how and why they are the way that they are, because they all have some pretty harrowing backstories that they like punch you in the gut, you know, like these are people who have suffered and people who have caused suffering. And it's just, also the story itself is just so engaging. Like I'm at the edge of my seat the entire time I'm reading this. I just had to know what was going to happen next. It was so good. And so because it was so good, like I gave this 5 stars. If that isn't obvious yet, I'm already rambling. I feel like I'm getting hot. But so obviously I then had to read the sequel, Crooked Kingdom. And he was even better. Like I knew, I had a feeling, because that's what everybody says, that it's better. But also, like, I mean, the first one is still excellent. I gave it 5 stars, and I gave Crooked Kingdom 5 stars. They were just so good. I really loved Crooked Kingdom. I think the storyline was even better than that of the first book, because the first book we're really focusing on this heist, and then it ends a certain way. And Crooked Kingdom is just, it's all about the aftermath, and you have to kind of figure out what's going to go on. And it's just, you want to know what's going to happen. You want to know what's going to happen to our characters. And it's just, it's so good. Also, the other thing that I really loved about Crooked Kingdom is Wylan. So Wylan he's a character, a very interesting character. And I knew in the first book that he was going to be my favorite. His is an archetype that I always have a soft spot for. I always tend to love his type of character. And like, I don't want to give anything away, obviously, but I knew I was going to love him. I knew I was going to love Wylan. And so I was really peeved at the fact that he did not get a POV in the first book. He was the only one of the 6 that didn't have a point of view. And I was really annoyed by it. Of course, you figure out why. So like it makes sense, but I was still peeved. But then he gets one in Crooked Kingdom, and I loved being in my boy's head. It was so good. Gosh, I loved it. I could just say I loved everything because that's pretty much how it was. The only other thing I wanted to touch on, well, there are a lot of things I could touch on here, but I also wanted to mention the reason why that I loved this so much. And the reason why I think it is different from some of the other more classic YA fantasy that I've read is the fact that you don't know what's happening. Like, you know, we've got a heist, we have plans, we have like things like they're planning for this stuff, right? We've got intrigue, whatever. But the reader doesn't know what's happening. Like, we don't know what's going on. We're given like the bare bones of what they're planning on doing, but we're never given any details. And so we're kind of along for the ride when things happen, and it's so much fun, and it makes it so engaging because you're just like, is this according to plan? Is this how the plan is supposed to go? Did something mess up? I don't know. And then you're like, wait, that was a contingency plan the whole time? Like, you never know what's going to happen. Like, the characters know more than the reader does, which I don't think is a common thing, particularly in YA fantasy, but just like in a lot of these like high stakes kinds of stories. I feel like so many times the reader is in on so much more. I think that can especially be the case when there's more than one point of view, but like the reader is in the dark like the whole time, and it makes it so fun and so fascinating because you're just like waiting to see what's going to happen and wondering if like, is it going to work out? I don't know, because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. It made it so much more, I've said engaging several times at this point, but that's the word that's all I've got right now. I liked it a lot, okay? I liked them a lot, and I gave them both 5 stars. Part of me is kind of mad about it because I know I'm like so far behind this trend at this point. Like I'm like miles away from the end of that wagon, but we're here now. We're jumping on, and I just loved them. Last but not least, I wanted to mention Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. This is what would you call this? It is both a nonfiction book and kind of a workbook. All about, like, I mean, it's what it says on the tin, right? Like, we've got Me and White Supremacy. It's really a 28-day guided reflection on the reader's relationship to white supremacy and to all of the things that have become a product of white supremacy. So it's like every day there is a bit of an explanation of a certain topic. So each day has a certain topic. So like you and cultural appropriation, or you and white superiority. And so each chapter or each day starts with a bit of an explanation of what this looks like, why this is important, why this is harmful, how you could be doing it, all of those things. And then it ends with a section of like journaling prompts. This was originally, I think, an actual just like journaling challenge that Layla Saad had on Instagram, and then she ended up making it a whole book. So I'm still counting it as a book because there's still good information in here, but it is definitely more of just a guided reflection on your relationship with white supremacy. And I thought this was excellent. I started this in February and I was going at it. I didn't quite get to it like on an everyday basis, but it was really, really excellent. I loved the way that this was done. And I think that the way that it definitely builds up things to kind of like start on a basic level and then get a little bit more granular to make it a little bit easier to, I guess, be honest when you're going through the reflection and to do your reflection in a little bit more of an informed way. But yeah, I thought this was really, really good. And I think that everybody who has an ounce of white privilege needs to pick this up because I think it is an excellent resource, an excellent tool, and something that I know I am going to revisit periodically because there's so much you can learn by just sitting and trying to, and like just sitting with yourself and thinking about these things in an intentional way. So this is a 5-star read. Again, it feels weird to rate it as a book, but here we are. I wanted to recommend this because I think, again, it's a really good, useful, and helpful resource for any and all of us who have white privilege. So, okay, so that is it. That is all I read for the month of March. I'm still shocked that I had such a good reading month. Again, like definitely the best month I've had in a while. I read so many good books. Nothing was less than 4 stars. I thoroughly enjoyed myself and had a couple new favorites, and all to the soundtrack of Taylor Swift. You can't get any better than that. But yeah, so don't forget to like and subscribe. And hop down into the comments. Let me know what you thought. If you've read any of these books and if you agree or not, or if I've convinced you to read any of these books, I would love to know. So please hop down into the comments and chat with me. But yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye.